Hello, everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Truth Wanted. It is December 7th, 2018. My name is ObjectivelyDan, and welcome to the show. Joining me today is a very special guest, a good friend of mine, a fellow co-host of the Street Epistemology podcast, Epistemic, and owner of the YouTube channel Cordial Curiosity. It is the one and only Reid Nicewonder. Reid, how is it going today, bud?
Awesome, Dan. Thanks so much for having me. This is so awesome.
Yes, dude. I've been wanting to get Reid onto this show from day one. I said, Reid, you're going to be one of my guests. It's going to happen. We just need to plan it out. And here we are. We're ready to have a good time. I'm excited for you to be on. You are one of the best in the field of street epistemology, in my opinion. I think the way that you do things and the way that you run your channel with how you talk to people is super awesome. And it's something that I hope you take a lot of pride in, because you should. And I hope other people can model your kind of behavior and the way that you talk to people. But while I'm going on and on about how awesome you are, do you want to kind of talk about like what it is you actually do on your channel and, why you're kind of interested in street epistemology in general?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I have a channel called Cordial Curiosity. You've had Anthony Magnamasco on the show already. So if you know of him, it's a very similar type of thing. I do street epistemology, where I go out in public and ask people about what they believe and why. I let them pick any topic. I've been doing it for about 2 years now with the YouTube channel, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I want to ask you the same question I think I ask any kind of person that does street epistemology is, why do you do street epistemology? Why do you choose to spend your time going out in public talking to people about these sometimes kind of taboo things?
I think when it comes down to it, in society, we have the perpetual choice between conversation and violence. So if we have better conversations about deeply held beliefs and stuff like that, then we'll be less likely to have to resort to violence. So I think it's really good that we be able to figure out how to have better conversations, and street epistemology is a great way to do it.
Cool. And I mean, you've been doing this, like you said, for like 2 years now, just talking to people out in public. From what I can see, your setup is pretty similar. You take the table and you have the signs and you let people sit down, but has the way that you've done things changed throughout this process? Are there things that you do kind of differently now than when you first started?
I originally started kind of different from what Anthony does. He does like the usual stand-up with like a clipboard and a GoPro on his chest. I went out originally with a table and some cameras on the table with some chairs and a sign on my table, and I just sat there letting people come up to me. I don't really ask people to sit down with me. I just sit there and wait. So that might be a little bit different. I've been doing that ever since I started. Anything different from when I started? I've gotten better at SE itself, but I think the general format has been pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about SE and when we say that we're talking about street epistemology, what does street epistemology really like mean to you? Because it might mean a little bit something different from what I call it and what Anthony calls it. So like, what is your kind of take on what this whole phenomenon is?
So cool. All right. Street epistemology is a way of having conversations about really any belief, any topic that you think is the case. Instead of focusing on the conclusion, we try to get to the reasons why people believe whatever they believe, and then in inspecting the quality of those reasons. That's a big part of how street epistemology is different from other ways. I know here on the ACA, there's a lot of trying to rebut certain whatever people are saying with other reasons or other facts. We usually only investigate whatever the people are saying themselves. We don't really add anything to their why their thing is true or why it's not true. We just inspect whatever they say as closely as possible.
Yeah, so I like that definition. It's like this idea of engaging people where they're at, just kind of starting with what they already start with, what they already believe, and just kind of going from there, seeing what kind of logical conclusions that can bring. seeing whether they're willing to change their minds about their beliefs and how strongly they are about it. I agree. I think it's an effective tool as well. And it's something that obviously I employ here on the show. And like I said, Reid, I think you are one of the best at it out there in the game right now. That doesn't mean that you'll be the best forever, though. I hope that more people can come up and compete for that title. I really do. I really hope to see more people kind of try out these kinds of methods and stuff. And hopefully we'll get to have to try it out a little bit on the show today with some of the callers and stuff. So
yeah, I'm really pumped that there's this kind of friendly competition now going on with all these SE YouTube channels.
Right.
I know you had Tyrone Wells on a few weeks ago, and he's surpassed me in subscribers, and he's awesome. He's awesome. Yeah.
I love Ty, man. Ty is great too. One day, like, we're gonna have a show where it's just all SE people sitting around this table taking calls and stuff. I think that would be really cool. Maybe we could try that someday. But so while we're talking about street epistemology stuff, I figured we could start with this first caller who wanted to talk about how we can engage with friends and family about what they believe. Are you ready to take calls, Reid?
Sure.
Okay, cool. This is Courtney in Kansas calling in. Courtney, can you hear us?
Hi, yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, how's it going, Courtney?
It's good. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing fantastic. I got my boy Reid on here today. I'm excited, ready to take some calls. So, yeah, tell me what's going on.
Awesome. Well, it's nice to meet you too, Reid. I guess I'm a fan of your show as well, so it's nice to get to chat with both of you guys. So I'm just kind of wondering if there's a best time to approach someone in a street epistemology sense about their belief in terms of where they're kind of on their journey with it. Like if it's a belief that's just kind of beginning, is it good to kind of get in there and try and nip it in the bud? Or is it better to kind of let them get a sense of what they believe first before approaching them?
It's an interesting question. I would start off by saying it entirely depends on the belief. Because you have to also understand that SE isn't necessarily a tool that we use to combat bad beliefs. It can be used for that, but that's also making a judgment about what those beliefs are. I'd say in theory, SE is able to tackle any kinds of beliefs, regardless of whether we think that they're good or bad. And so I think it's a process that we can use on ourselves for all kinds of beliefs. So I would say it depends on where they're at in the belief process and whether or not it's a good time to actually engage critically on how strongly they believe in it. I think the best times is when people are first forming those beliefs, when they aren't sure either way, because that's when you see the most malleability with people who are saying, I'm not sure, I don't have as high of a confidence. But I don't think that means that we can exclude it when people already have really strong beliefs. I know Reid and I have both talked to people who are super, super strong about their beliefs and have still been able to come down a little bit on their confidence scale of how strongly they believe something. So I'd say, in summary, like any time really is a good time to do it. I don't know if there's one best time, What do you think, Reid?
I pretty much agree. If it's just a casual belief, feel free to engage anytime. If it's more deeply held, something that's kind of close to their identity, even still, it's feel free to let them explain whatever they believe, and you could get into some reasons possibly. And if you keep it casual and friendly, I don't see why not to just keep going further.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. This situation in particular is with someone who's really close to me, and she's had some kind of nebulous woo sorts of ideas for a while now, but there have been some things happening in her life recently that have made her start considering, I guess, more specific venues for that. She's thinking of contacting a shaman in our area, who I, was curious about and asked about and went and looked at their stuff, and really seems to be kind of more of a con man than anything. And, she charges exorbitant amounts of money and has all of these ideas about being able to cure things or helping people to find success. And that sort of thing, which has got me nervous.
Is there a specific reason why she's contacting a shaman? Like, is there like a problem in her life she's trying to solve, or?
She's wanting to contact someone who recently passed.
Oh, okay.
And she thinks that this person can maybe do that.
Yeah.
And she's also had some other things. There are some health concerns for her spouse and other things that have been there for a really long time. But I know she can, I want to be really kind, but she gets excited about new possibilities that she sees and really gets her hopes up that someone is going to be able to fix the thing. And that's just not something that's going to be able to happen. And I don't want to take her hope away from her or that sort of thing, but I'm quite nervous that she's going to get suckered into this particular person's orbit.
Well, I want to be super clear, and I want Reid's opinion on this as well. But first, I would say you are being a good friend by wanting to talk to her about this, okay? And I don't want you to feel guilty otherwise for taking away some sort of hope that she might have of any kinds of other possibilities. I know that that's an argument that comes up sometimes with people saying, "Oh, you're taking this kind of joy away from people." Well, she's going to be losing a lot more if she goes to someone and
right.
Loses money and picks up this. It's a common pattern that happens. People who start to pick up on these kinds of beliefs end up going to more kinds of things. People who believe in astrology also can believe in talking to the dead, also believe, it can be a slippery slope sometimes. And I think it is good that you are willing to engage with her about this first and foremost. I think that does make you a good friend. So I don't want you to feel unconfident about that. But the other thing I would say is, I want to know, have you talked to her about this at all? Have you even engaged with her, or is this something you're kind of observing? Has there been any dialogue about this at all?
We're very close. So there has been dialogue. The difficulty is that she's pretty ostracized from our family. Not ostracized, but there's a lot of tension between her kind of more woo type beliefs and other family members that are very hyper religious, and then myself, who's an atheist. And so we've bonded very much on kind of being the black sheep or the outsiders in a sense.
Yeah.
And so in the course of that bonding, I think I've been more encouraging with some of her things, like she really likes crystals, and I'm like, that's great that you like crystals. Do you enjoy your life? And I think in trying to be positive in that manner, I've unintentionally kind of bolstered some of her other woo type of beliefs when I was just meaning to say, hey, I don't judge you for what you believe. And now that it's getting to something that seems a little bit more dangerous.
Right. And you don't...
I'm wanting to be able to have more, not critical conversations, but conversations where we're engaging more critically together with
Absolutely.
the ideas.
And I had a conversation about this with a coworker this week as well, because they were kind of asking what I do with the show and stuff. And we were talking about whether or not, like psychics, for example, are something where it's okay where we let our friends to go to and stuff. And, there's also the element of supporting an industry that, has essentially been lying to people. There's two kinds of people who kind of do these sorts of things. They're the ones who know consciously that they're deceiving people. And then there are the ones who actually believe that they do have these powers and they are helping people in a sense. I don't know what's more common. And I don't know what this shaman person is like either. But it is something to think about, and it is something to, consider. But I want to hear Reid's take on this before I say anything more.
Yeah,
Yes,
sounds like a tough situation. Based on my
It's complicated.
Based on my little education on just general moral psychology, people are trying to feel in control of their lives in these types of situations, like when in terms of like health or denying death. That's a big part of it. So she's like trying to grab onto something that allows her to have some sense of control. And if you're going to push on that, whatever she sees as being in control, it's not going to go very well. So she needs something else to grab onto to kind of lessen the resistance on this. If she doesn't have some alternative, it's going to be hard to talk about anything. So I don't know.
That's a really good point.
If it has to do something about science or something to do about health, maybe talk more about the reliability of science in medicine like that, or try to think of other ways she could meet these ways of handling her problems in a more science-based way.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a very complicated situation. There may not be one simple answer. I'd say the first thing, I like what Reid is saying is there is something else that needs to be held on to there. And if there's some other kinds of beliefs that she already has that isn't going to hurt her, that isn't going to cost her money or cost her all kinds of other problems later on, it might be healthy just to engage in those beliefs with her. Because even if, I'm not saying actively lie and say, oh, I think that this person is going to be in heaven right now and they're looking down on you, you know? But maybe just meeting the person where they're at first and seeing what their most immediate needs are, because sometimes there's other things going on that are mixed in with them as well that don't have to do with the person's death. That's kind of causing these kinds of, the emotions and general sadness that comes up with these things. I had my dog pass away a few weeks ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, I appreciate it. But, it was one of those things where it was like, I was sad for a day, really miserable. But, it is a dog, and I knew that she was old, and I had kind of grieved a lot of that already and stuff because I knew it was going to happen. And then it happens, and then you move on with life. So, but what was really good was just having conversations about that person's death in the first place with people, and just seeing what they were like and just kind of talking about it. And I think the more you kind of talk about it, even if they don't necessarily always want to talk about it, you want to take it on their pace, I think that's going to help them more get over this first than before she's even going to want to consider doing these other kinds of activities. I could be wrong, but there's an idea.
Yeah, no, those are really good ideas. I think trying to find something that she can latch onto and have that sense of control, that's a really, really good point as well that I hadn't really considered, so that's super helpful.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's, like I said, there's no one science thing. Like, here, throw this science at her and tell her that everything's going to be cool and don't do this other thing. And it's just not how human beings work. And I would be afraid of you trying to completely challenge her entire notion of people being able to contact the dead at the time where she's feeling right now, where it's
I know that's
not the best
that
time.
I want to do.
Right. So that's why I'm kind of suggesting maybe SE on those particular beliefs isn't the best route. Maybe the best thing right now is to just be a good friend and meet her needs first so that she doesn't have to go to places where she doesn't need to go,
Yeah. And I'm trying to do that. It's a little complicated because it's a relative who's also my very, very close friend. Like, she's my aunt, but she's almost more of like my sister or best friend in a lot of ways. And the relative who died is my grandmother. And, she passed, she was 104, and it's similar kind of to your dog. She was, had been dealing with dementia and things for a really long time. So, it wasn't sudden. We all kind of knew, and we've all been there, and we're a very small family. So we've been doing everything we can to kind of help each other out. I'm just at a point where I know that she's in this vulnerable place, and I'm doing everything I can to be there for her. But I also know that that people who are, whether they truly believe that they have, psychic powers or things, or whether they're more charlatans, often wind up kind of preying on people who are really vulnerable.
Yes.
And so I'm seeing this new idea kind of forming in her where, I should contact this shaman or this medium, and they'll be able to put me in touch with her again. And I'm just kind of in my head seeing this potential for her to wind up in a really bad situation, and I'm
absolutely
wanting to try and get ahead of it, but maybe that's not the best thing, and to just kind of leave it be for now. And
I like to say this, I'm not going to debate Christianity with somebody at the baptism of someone's child. There's kind of these cultural moments that, unfortunately, and it's hard for us to admit sometimes, it's kind of just best to give a pass at the moment. And we don't want to make that a thing that happens all the time, right? But when it comes to really intimate and personal things like death in the family, you're going to be that guy that's going to be the dick that's going to tell this person that your grandma's not in heaven. I mean, nobody wants to be that, and nobody wants to have that thrust upon them, even if it's true, right? Even if it's 100% true.
Yeah.
So you got to pick your battles. And
absolutely.
I think this is one where you're being smart about it right now. You haven't gone up to her and said, look, this is all wrong. You can't just do this right now. But you're not encouraging it either, and I think that's really good. So I'd say, like we were talking about before, just be the best person you can be with them right now. And
well, thanks.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're doing a good job. So
best of luck.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really helpful, and I really appreciate your time, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for calling in, Courtney.
Yeah.
Oh, I just hung up before she got to say a whole goodbye. But yeah, that's really tough. I definitely would not want to be in that situation either.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
It's a lot. But, just because you're being with them this one time and you let them kind of work things out doesn't mean that you can't have conversations about this topic in the future. When people are more ready to kind of examine these beliefs and be a little bit more critical about, what's going on. But there's no one way to go about it. I agree. I keep saying it. There's a variety of ways. There's a lot of things to consider. And you just got to keep all those things in mind and do the best that you can do. So.
Yep.
That's my take. Anyway, let's go on to, I guess, another topic about kind of death a little bit. This is Ted in Pennsylvania who wanted to talk about what happens when we die. Ted, are you there?
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. So tell me more about this topic that you want to talk about.
Well, what I want to talk about is known as generic subjective continuity, and it is kind of a alternative to the idea of there being oblivion or blackness after we cease to exist.
Okay.
I'm an atheist, and I do not believe in heaven or any supernatural stuff after we die. So I agree that we cease to exist when we die, but I don't think that just because our experience is over that is the end of experience. We talked about this before, actually, during the pilot of your show a while ago.
I do remember this conversation, and that's why your voice sounded familiar. Yes.
Yeah, so you remember my brother died, and it sent me into this kind of like obsession with death, and so I developed this theory on my own that because there are still organisms being born after I cease to exist, that there will be basically kind of like what I refer to as a camera switch from my perspective to the new perspective of a newly whichever organism happens to be born immediately after I die.
Yes, I want to know, Reid, did you happen to catch this conversation? Do you know anything about what we were talking about here?
I did. I don't remember it though.
Yeah, so if I could summarize what you're saying right now so that I understand what you're saying, it's not exactly reincarnation necessarily, but it is kind of a switch of viewpoints after death in an already existing organism, right? Not like just being born.
No, it would have to be an organism that is newly conceived immediately after I die.
So it is birth then. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that my death is required for that organism to have an experience, because whether or not I lived or not, that organism still would be born and it would still have its experience with or without me. But my point is that because experience kind of takes precedence over nothingness. Does that make sense to you?
Possibly. I want Reid to kind of start tackling this one. Give him some airtime today.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
So in street epistemology, we usually ask up front what people's confidence is about whatever they believe. Like say on a scale from 0 to 100, where 100 is absolute confidence, no more questions, like could not be mistaken about it. 0, all questions, all doubt. Where would you find yourself on this?
I'm very confident with it. So
very confident. Gotcha.
Yeah, I actually pretty much completely accept it as truth, except for, well, I'd say maybe 99%, because I do realize that my mouth is getting dry, but I do realize that there actually is a possibility that maybe Christians are right and maybe we do have souls and maybe we do go to heaven. But I just highly doubt that.
So that's another option, is the Christianity afterlife. Are there any other possibilities in your mind about afterlives or no afterlives at all?
I used to accept the idea that most, excuse me, I gotta take a drink. That most atheists share is the idea of there being like nothingness afterwards. But I realized that doesn't make much sense, because, well, unless you really understand what nothingness is, and nothingness just means that I cease to exist. But if I cease to exist and in a cosmos that is still having experiencers born into it, then just like my experience took precedence since the day I was born, wouldn't something else then take precedence as soon as it's born?
Possibly. I would just wonder how that continuity would work. I
think it's just because the only thing that exists is the cosmos, and so there's either experience or there is, and there is. If there is no experience, then it is not an experience, but there is only experience. And
yeah.
Do you understand?
Was there ever a time before anything was alive in your mind?
Yeah, but for that living thing, it wouldn't be able to recall not being alive. Just like my personal feeling is that everything I remember is only within the context of my own life. So it feels to me that I have always been, you know what I mean? It's almost as if I've always existed, but I haven't.
It feels like that for you.
You're right. Yes, there would definitely have to be a first living organism, and so yeah, there was nothing, but it wasn't a fact for anyone. Just as Epicurus pointed out, when death is, I am not, and so it would just it's not a fact for me. So, but what is a fact is experience or consciousness. It is always a fact. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Cool. So what would you say is the main reason why you believe this to be the case, that we'd survive after our deaths?
Well, after my brother died, before he died, I believed in God, and I prayed that he, save him, but he didn't. And so I realized, this is a whole lot of horse shit, and I have to stop believing this. And so then I really went back. I used to be an atheist years before that, and so I went back to my atheism, and I was like, okay, I am going to figure out what the heck happens after we die. And it occurred to me, it just like came to me out of thin air that, oh my God, after my experience is over, there's just going to be a continuity of experience via some new organism. And it is not reincarnation, because it would be basically like as if I went to sleep one night and then I woke up the next morning and I had no memories whatsoever of anything. And I woke up and I didn't even know to question what is life. I didn't even know what a question was. You know what I mean? Like being a fetus in a womb, basically. But so that all occurred to me. And then I was just like, so I for about a few months, I was talking to people about this and stuff. And then I came across this guy named Tom W. Clark, who runs a website called naturalism.org. And I read his essay called Death, Nothingness, and Subjectivity. And I was like, oh my God, we came to the same conclusion independently. And he actually had things on his website where other people came to the same exact conclusion as him independently. So I personally feel like this is like kind of like the moment that Darwin realized about evolution being true, and everybody else was like, "Oh, that's woo, that's that's word salad and all that." But and that's what everybody's saying in the comment section right now.
You're saying it came to you, or it occurred to you, and this is the reason why you believe it to be the case?
Well, I researched it a lot too, and then it was really reified for me whenever I saw that other atheists were also independently coming to this conclusion. And logically, it's the only conclusion that I can make if I cease to exist. I feel like if I cease to exist, in the same way that my existence disallows for nothingness to be what is, then in that same way, that has to happen again, only it won't be me, and I won't have any previous memories, just like being born again.
I'm kind of confused why you're saying it has to happen again.
Well, I suppose you're right. It doesn't have to happen again, because there could be a period in time where there will be the very last thing that ever lives. And whenever that thing dies, after that, then unless the cosmos starts all over and evolution starts over again, and then life starts over again, and then maybe it starts. See, I just keep coming back to the idea of like the universe being infinite.
Well, I think Reid has a question for you.
Is this is this belief testable at all? Is there any way to tell if we're mistaken about this?
That's a very good point. I do not think that's another reason I do say, I tell people, I'm saying, this is a big if, I mean, it's quite possible we have souls, and it's quite possible that, well, maybe after I die, I just have a frozen screen of my last thing I ever saw, and it's just frozen screen for the rest of my life, and for the rest of eternity. And I don't really understand how that would work, because I would decompose, my brain would decompose, and so that doesn't make sense to me either. But no, it's not testable.
It's not testable.
But
so you're currently 99% confident.
What's that?
So it's not testable.
Confident.
So does that mean you could not? Are you stuck at 99% for the rest of your life?
I don't know. I don't think it's a bad place to be stuck. I feel like I'm just as satisfied with this worldview as I am with a worldview of determinism. And like I'm a determinist, and I'm just as satisfied with that. And I, you know, it's almost as difficult to, it's probably more difficult to prove than free will. I mean, determinism.
If this wasn't true, would you want to know that?
Yes, that's what I want. That's what I want. I want somebody to disprove it.
If it's not testable at all, how could that happen?
Yes, good point. Very good point. I like that. I just feel like it's, personally, I just keep surmising in my head, and I keep coming to this conclusion. I'm like, okay, so like at the time of the dinosaurs, none of us existed, right? So, but the dinosaurs did exist. They were what did exist. So in the very same way that I'm having this visceral experience of experience right now, my consciousness, that was the fact back then for the dinosaurs, only each as individuals, they experienced it individually. But in the same way I'm looking out of my eyes right now, there was a dinosaur at that period in time that was looking out of its eyes the very same way that I am right now, this visceral experience of life.
What I'm hearing you say is you could be a reincarnated dinosaur?
No. That's not what I'm saying.
I think he's making a comparison of experiences as kind of a fact.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if whatever consciousness was in that dinosaur is just, it just keeps going in new organisms over time, why couldn't that be the case?
No.
Yeah, that's true. Right.
No. I don't believe in souls, and I do not believe in dualism in that context.
But you do. It's more like a continuous experience. It just kind of keeps going. Is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
There is a consciousness that is kind of seeing and experiencing things, and it goes through different incarnations, sort of over time.
No.
Is that kind of
no?
Well, different physical bodies, but
what you're describing is kind of reincarnation.
Mm-hmm. Well,
what I'm describing is the fact that the cosmos continues to have experiencers born into it. Alan Watts actually made a really good talk about this. He called the talk, he said, "Everybody is I." He said, everybody has the experience of being I, you know. Mm-hmm. From our point of view, we are all the one. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, I've heard a lot from Alan Watts and stuff. I think he's really interesting, and he gives a lot of really descriptive ideas. But I think Reid kind of touched on a critical point that I'd like to go back on. It's this idea of, well, if we can't test this belief, if we have no idea of kind of examining it through any kind of measure, how can we have any confidence in the belief being true?
Well, I feel like it's only surmisable. It's only like it's purely logical. But yeah, totally. There could I have been lately.
So I'll give you an example.
I could be wrong. I tell myself that all the time. I'm like, there could be something that I am not considering at all, and I could be wrong.
I want to give you an example that you actually brought up earlier, which is really brilliant. You talked about Darwin's theory of evolution. And you're right in that when Darwin first proposed this kind of idea of, of different animals coming from a kind of almost a single lineage, if you go back far enough, that might sound a bit odd. That might sound kind of crazy. But I think what's interesting about Darwin is that even now we can look at and examine speciation occurring through a mechanism. Yeah. Like we can actually look at DNA changing. We can actually see the processes that are making this belief like why we believe it to be true. we can actually examine it and kind of test it and compare it to other ideas like intelligent design and things like that, which might give an alternative explanation to the idea of where did all these beings come from.
Right.
But
I mean, in a world that never had religion, we would still discover that evolution was true.
I agree.
I mean, I personally, I have this belief that people a long time ago, probably during the time when there was all these different humanoids walking on the planet, I have a sneaking suspicion that they probably had some view of evolution. Hey, look at us. We look just like freaking apes. We had to come from them. You know what I mean?
I know of some cultures that have talked about the bonobos being kind of brothers to humanity in my anthropology classes. But yeah, I think there's reason to believe why people could come to those conclusions. But if we're examining the truth behind those conclusions, as in the methodology behind how we can know those conclusions to be true, they may not have had access to the data that we have now, the evidence that we have now to kind of confirm or at least give a higher confidence to what's being true. But I'm having trouble understanding how in your worldview we can even begin to collect any kind of data to know that this is the case. And if we could or couldn't, like let's say that we could have a method and, well, I'm not going to go that way actually. I'm going to ask, do you think that it's a good idea to have confidence in an idea that we can't actually test? At least as high of a confidence that you have in an idea that's ultimately untestable?
Well, I don't think this particular idea, it does do some, it is traumatic emotionally to accept at first that like, I could, the next experience could be that of a maggot or a mayfly. You know what I mean? But, beyond that, it does give very good reason for like the golden rule to treat other people with kindness. But, yeah, I get your point. But I just feel like if it's a big if we cease to exist when we die, then to me this is the logical conclusion that I end, but something else begins. And because there is only the cosmos, then this is the only place that things happen. And so
if you
what happens is what happens.
If you came to that conclusion that we no longer exist after we die, there's nothing there, how do you think you would live your life differently?
Well, the same, really, except for, that's pretty depressing, the idea that there would just be, what would ceasing to exist be if there was nothing to later interrupt that nothingness? You know what I mean?
I'm not sure, actually.
Like it would be similar to just 20 years before you were born.
An eternity. Well, actually, that's a very good point. Yeah, because it wouldn't be a fact for me. So, but either way, it's pretty much, it's almost like Alan Watts said. It's like saying the same thing. He actually did make that point. But so technically, I believe to answer your question, I think I would. Not much would change, really. And since I have adopted this theory, not much has changed, honestly, for me. So that's, I really appreciate you asking me that question, because I didn't really even consider that not much has changed for me as far as the way I conduct my life.
Do you think, you mentioned this idea that it's almost incomprehensible to understand what the ceasing of consciousness would be like. And does that affect your confidence at all? Like, do you think that if we could understand what that even meant, that would change your confidence in this belief being true?
I mean, because I can't be 100% sure, I definitely do sometimes sit around and ponder what other possibilities there could be. And so that's always a fun thought exercise.
Yeah, I mean, because I could. The reason why I ask this is because I can definitely come up with examples in my mind of some more comprehensible ideas of after we die. Like I could say, my experience just zaps me up to heaven, and like that makes sense, right? Because I'm still kind of alive, and I kind of maybe would know what that feels like. But the kind of comprehensibility of it doesn't seem to necessarily reflect the truth of it.
Definitely.
If it's true that our experiences kind of stop happening after we pass away, I wouldn't be able to tell what that is like regardless, because I have no experiences of that, right? So it almost it doesn't seem like
Epicurus said.
Yeah. So my confidence in the belief doesn't seem to would change at all if.
So I come back to the same kind of nihilistic worldview that I've had my entire life, honestly. And I love the lyrics. Freddie Mercury wrote "Nothing Really Matters," and that kind of nihilist is, to me, it's freeing. To me, it's liberating, because it's like, phew, I'm glad nothing really matters, because if things really mattered, that kind of implies that there's a God, and he gave us meaning and all this and that, and it's just like that's too much stress for me. I can't live in that world.
Do we need to be able to live forever for things to matter in this life?
No. See, the idea is that I don't believe that I live forever. In my theory, the theory that I told you about is called generic subjective continuity, and I believe that I cease to exist. So it will be the utter end of me, and so I won't be around to appreciate whatever is next. But whatever is next, it'll be like I said, the same state of mind that I had whenever. It won't be me though, but that future organism will have the state of mind of a freshly conceived whatever it is, a freshly conceived human or a freshly conceived baby horse or whatever it might be. But it will have no memories whatsoever. So it will be a complete deleting of my life.
Okay, that sounds pretty close to just dying in general.
Yeah. But there isn't nothingness after that. Instead, there is something else, some other perspective subsumes or takes over or follows.
Mm-hmm. But if the part that makes you kind of dies, like isn't there anymore, doesn't that just mean that you have died? Like, what is the relationship between this new thing that has experiences and the old thing?
What's that last part? I'm sorry.
What is the relationship between the thing that's dying and the new thing that's having experiences? How are they connected in any way?
There's no connection.
Okay. Maybe I'm a bit confused. If one thing is having a separate experience and then dying, and then another being is having a separate experience, I mean,
living. It's just, I think it's a more, to me, it describes what happens after death, rather than just saying, well, there's nothing after. We kind of bookshelf our lives in this, like, okay, there was nothing before my birth and there's nothing after my death. But in reality, there is never nothing in the cosmos. There is, before my birth, there was lots of life. And after my death, there will be lots of life. You know what I mean? And we kind of like bookshelf ourselves into this egotistical little blip. And we think that's it, and really it's not it. And the thing is, an important point that I need to make is that future organism will be the the self. That will be the one experiencing, and so it will be the new I. It will be the new first-person experience, and so it will be like hitting, similar to like hitting a reset button. It's like a complete renewal of an appreciation for the cosmos.
Okay. So at some point there was nothing alive, and currently there are now billions, trillions of living things, at least on Earth. Where do these new living, whatever is in their consciousness, come from?
Anything that is newly conceived in the cosmos, like say maybe it's a mosquito, or maybe it's a maggot, or maybe it's a horse, or maybe it's an elephant. Anything that is newly conceived, as long as it will only be one individual organism, because just as I experienced myself as an individual, it too will only experience itself as an individual. And so there, like the Earth is constantly, like you said, is constantly having trillions of things born on it. So there's no shortage of supply of experiencers.
Yeah. What gives these new living things consciousness?
Oh, that's the question, isn't it?
Is everything alive conscious?
No. Only, like what I say is, instead of the word consciousness, I like to use the word experience or experiencers, because I don't really think that maybe a microorganism might have an experience, but I don't know if it counts as consciousness. It you know what I mean? Like an ant definitely has an experience of being an ant, but does it have an ego? I don't know about that. So
is it possible for a human to lose this experience state and still be alive?
Sorry, is it? Yeah, with like anesthesia or being knocked out and things like that. It happens to us all the time. But anesthesia is very different from death, because
is that a discontinuity in this experience? Anesthesia?
Pardon me?
Is that a discontinuity in this experience?
Yeah.
So it's possible to not be entirely continuous with this experience.
Well, for me, that lack of experience, if say somebody knocks me out, I won't experience that 45 minutes where I'm out cold. You know what I mean? So for me, from my perspective, that period of time where I'm knocked out is skipped over.
And
right?
Why couldn't that experience just be knocked out indefinitely when we die?
Because when I die, my brain dissolves. And so with anesthesia, my brain is still there waiting for me to wake up. But when I die, my brain is no longer there waiting for me to wake up. And I have nothing there as a placeholder.
Yeah. Okay. I have no idea where to go with this.
Yeah, this is interesting, Tad. I'm sure some people in the comment sections have already been engaging with you on this. I think we're probably going to have to go now for time. This is a really great conversation, by the way. But I would be curious to know, maybe in a future conversation if you want to call back, or if you want to go on like the ACA Discords or some of the ACA Facebook pages to engage with other people, is this idea that we were talking about kind of earlier on the mechanisms behind this belief. Like, I agree with you. There's a logic going on to your belief. Whether or not it's actually happening, though, those are kind of two different things. I can imagine a lot, like Christianity, for example, and going back to that, has a logic to it in a way. Like, it has an internal system where things kind of work. Even if it doesn't completely make sense, there's something to that. But just because something is consistent within its own logical framework doesn't necessarily mean that that framework exists in reality.
Totally.
And that's what I would challenge you to come to us, to convince us of your belief. I think we'd have to know the mechanisms. I think Reid would agree with me on this, in that we need to know how we know for sure that this is happening and not something else, that it's not just an end of our entire experiences, that we're not actually all going to heaven, that we're not actually going to be waking up in a lab somewhere by scientists. You know, like, there's other things that could be going on, but until we have a mechanism to know for sure, until we have any evidence to any of these other phenomenon, I think Reid and I would have to choose to withhold our belief.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Hello? Okay. Hey, I want to let you know that music that you guys were listening to before the show came on, that really cool techno.
Yeah.
That was Juno. That was a band called Juno Reactor.
Yeah.
I love those guys, but I just want to let you know that. But anyways, the reason I called in was I did want to try to convince you guys of my view, and but I also did want to be challenged.
Yes.
And so you guys did that, and so I really appreciated this conversation as well.
I appreciated this conversation too, Ted. I think Reid and I can both agree. This was really interesting. This is definitely not the typical kinds of beliefs that we get to talk about on here. So, I say call again if you have something to bring to us. This is what we've laid out to you. This is what we want to know. And if not, maybe consider changing your own beliefs. I don't know. Maybe that's the option. Right? Sometimes
all right, I'll be working on it.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for calling, Ted. This was fun. We'll see you next time.
All right, bye.
Thanks, Ted.
Fun stuff. Yeah, I remember when we had this conversation in, I think it was our pilot episode or one of the pilot episodes about this idea. And when I was first starting out trying this call-in show thing, I was like, oh man, this is way different than the typical stuff you kind of hear. What did you think about that conversation, Reid?
Yeah. For sure. I mean, we were talking earlier to the other caller about, how her aunt or something was had issues with a belief related to death, and I think this is very similar. A huge portion of what drives our beliefs and actions is a sense of trying to deny death. Like, we try to do things to leave a lasting legacy in our lives. It's another part of it. Like doing this show, is a part of it a little bit. This might exist far after we're gone. So this is, in a sense, a way to survive our own deaths a little bit. It's a powerful psychological factor. And if we're not careful, that can lead us to believing in things that may not be evidence-based, but it's good to talk about these things.
Absolutely. Death and psychology seem to go hand in hand. And for some reason, we talk about death a lot on this show. I don't know why. It just kind of happens. I think it's just important to the human psyche. It's something that's kind of always on the back of people's minds. And I'm perfectly fine talking about whatever people want to talk to me about. But I do wonder why we talk about it here so much. I really don't have an explanation. It just kind of happens. I want to remind people that we do have some open lines, so you can check the number on the screen there if you want to call. And Reid and I will be here for at least about 30 minutes or so, taking in people's calls and stuff. What do you think about this so far, Reid? I mean, you've never done the call-in show thing before.
I have not done the call-in thing. I don't think. Maybe on some other channels, but not like, not in this way. Mm-hmm. But this is fun, though.
Yeah, it is fun. So always, guys, stick around. Afterwards, I have some announcements I want to bring to you guys as well. But before we get into that, let's go into our next caller, shall we? This is Dylan in Irvine, California, who, again, talking about a running theme here on the show, eternal life from a scientific viewpoint. Dylan, are you on the line?
I am on the line. How's it going, Dan?
It's going real well. Good to hear from you, Dylan. How's it going? Tell me about this eternal life from a scientific viewpoint thing you got going on.
Yeah. So this is kind of a new spin on it. And I appreciate what you're saying about death is a really big psychological motivating factor for people to talk about, or it drives the conversation for centuries. But, you know, science kind of gives us a cool viewpoint about it, I think. I would say that not only is life eternal, but so is death. And so is before you were born eternal. And I'm basing this on something called the B theory, or block universe theory. And it's basically an interpretation that comes out of Einstein's relativity theory. And it basically says that the universe, if we were to actually be able to objectively step out of our universe and look at it, you can almost picture it like a cube, like a frozen cube of events, of timelines, and things of that nature, right? So it's called the block theory for that reason. But what this says is that all times that exist somewhere, that in the same sense. So in a way, the present, the future, the past, it all exists in the same sense, not in the same time, but in the same sense, because in this way, time is kind of hard to talk about. But
yeah,
that kind of indicates is that, you know, your death is eternal. It's eternally frozen. Your life, everything. So it's kind of goes back to what your last caller was talking about. But instead of us reliving some other person, I guess what this is saying is that, you know, your life continues. It's kind of like a movie. You know, your life is kind of like a strip of a movie, and you know, it plays as long as you're conscious, as long as you're aware of it. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I've actually heard of this idea before, and I think Reid's nodding his head here. I think he's heard of this as well. This kind of idea that time kind of exists differently outside of the human perspective as like a dimension, and that dimension can be kind of looked at all in one kind of place, I guess, is the best word or best phrase to describe it. I'm not a mathematician or a physicist or anything like that. I just know the popular science behind it. I read a book that talked about this one time, so I'm not an expert, but I think what you're saying is this idea that time is all together in one place, and we can, from an objective perspective, somehow, if you got that perspective, you can look at it in kind of one whole frame of reference, I guess. I don't know if that's the best way to put it. Reid, do you have... Oh, yeah, okay, so you agree. Okay, so maybe that is the best way to put it. But I think Reid and I would probably agree on the first question to ask about this would be, how confident are you in this belief being true?
I'm about as confident as I am in relativity theory. I mean, it predicted like time dilation. You know, that's why we have GPS. I mean, I think all of that is pretty much demonstrated. And so, you know, all of these different things that relativity theory predicted, of course, they all came true. And if it's consistent, then I would say that this idea of time, this interpretation about time, is probably just as true, just as real.
Interesting.
Yeah. I would want to back up and explore some maybe hidden premises in this argument and some definitions. So what I'm hearing you say is this: we have the universe is set in this block. It's just like includes the time and space and everything. It's just the past is set, the future is set, and this in some way gives us eternal life because it's all set anyway. So in some way you could say we have eternal life in that way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and from that perspective, and eternal death as well.
Yeah. Is this what people mean when they say they want to live, or they want eternal life usually, or is this different?
Obviously it's different. It's not a soul that continues after your death as a different substance. that, that goes on and on and on. But in a sense, it kind of says something about conscious experience, because if this is true, if, this is the life that we have and it's set in stone, so to speak, then it's always here. So when we die, it's kind of just another perspective. It's another, it's just another state of our being. But what this kind of tells me, though, some of the, I guess the, how should I put it? I don't know, something that makes me feel a little at peace with this whole thing of life and death is that this notion of the self, this kind of shows like that the universe is very deterministic. The fact that everything is set in stone, so to speak, everything is deterministic. So that what that kind of says is that it kind of has implications about what we mean by the self and free will and things of this nature, right? And so it kind of relieves you of a lot of anxiety about, worried about afterlife, worried about, making this life, I don't know, being this sort of existential angst that comes with living, that most people go through. Mm-hmm. But to know that, we're kind of determined, we're kind of on a ride and we're just experiencing this ride, is kind of deep and sort of spiritual. I don't like that word spiritual, but it's kind of similar to what people mean by spirituality, I guess. And so in that sense, maybe.
Gotcha. So it's a way to feel like like it's a lack of free will, almost like you're on the ride. Things are going to happen as they're going to happen, regardless of what I want to happen. So there's no sense in getting upset about it, whatever happens, that type of thing.
Sort of, and the other question that comes up, of course, I don't want to get too scientific and, kind of lose your listeners or anything, but we also have this thing called quantum mechanics, and we come into this problem of the uncertainty principle and non-locality and all of these sort of concepts that are proven true, and they kind of contradict relativity in a way, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think that means reality is illogical, but I think that we just don't have the whole story. But some of the interpretations regarding quantum mechanics and this whole scenario is that possibly there's multi-universes and that each universe is a block universe. So decisions that we make, we kind of sort of do have a kind of free will in a way, in the sense that it's kind of random. So if we make decisions, maybe in this universe, there could be a possibility that we make a different decision in another universe. But each of those have their own timelines. They're all kind of determined based on the decisions you make. So it's kind of a weird way to describe free will if that was true. But of course, that's just another interpretation of quantum mechanics. So I have no idea whether that's true or not. Right?
Yeah, so Delon, this is why I like it when you call, because you're a deep thinker and you encompass a lot of ideas when you come in and call and talk to us and stuff. Sometimes I think it goes over some of our viewers' heads and it gets lost on some people. But and we have talked about this specific point before, but when it comes to quantum mechanics, that's a whole ball game of things that I don't even want to touch. I don't even want to deal with because Yep. I'm not qualified, but also because like 90% of the time when people are talking about quantum mechanics, they really have no idea what they're talking about. And I'm not saying this is you, but I am saying that they usually use it to push a lot of woo and a lot of things saying like, oh, that you can phase through walls because quantum mechanics is a thing and that gives you these powers and abilities and stuff. So if we can, I'd love to take the scope of this conversation just a little bit back down to earth a little bit. Yep. And again, this isn't me saying, oh, this belief is silly and it's wrong and you shouldn't have it. But it is me saying, we got a lot of people here who want to hear us get to the point about whatever we're trying to talk about, and I'm trying to contain it as much as possible, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, I just throw that out to put a little disclaimer out there
Sure.
on what I'm saying, because, there are other views that but at the end of the day, it's still we still know that relativity it works for us. Mm-hmm. We know that it gives us the technology that we use every day. I mean, just like quantum mechanics does, but I mean, it all works for us. And so if I'm consistent with these ideas, then I can kind of carve out a nifty little worldview out of it. I mean, it is an interpretation, but
this sounds
I
like
want to base it on some kind of facts,
Yeah, it sounds like this is a belief that you want to set the record straight on because it gives you comfort, in a sense.
Yeah, comfort.
This
exactly.
idea of eternal life, that ultimately nothing changes and that there are forces beyond us and stuff. I can see how that can be appealing, and that can give us comfort. Reid, did you have a question you want to ask?
Not really. This is a big topic that I have no expertise in, and
so
it would take a long time to pick apart.
Yeah, again, like, these ideas can be so complex. And this is an interesting point to factor in when we're talking about these beliefs, because the more that we talk about things that we don't understand, the more the possibility that could be being wrong. I don't know what your educational background is, Dylan, but let's say that there is a misinterpretation among some of the science that we're talking about here along the way. And we found that out after doing a bit of research. Like, let's say the science of relativity has changed a little bit, and that we've learned some new information. Would that change the way that you believe this belief? Would your confidence in this? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd always say that at what I call it is, I'm not a scientist. I don't know anything. I mean, I read a lot of things. I've been to college, and I've studied physics, in school, and I've studied philosophy and a lot of things. But, the one big axiom about, critical thinking and science is it's not about 100% certainty, and it's not about going into a theory trying to prove it right. In fact, good science tries to prove things wrong. You try to disprove hypothesis. Mm-hmm. That's the whole idea. Pseudoscience likes to make a claim and then try to find evidence to support it. It's totally ass backwards, right?
Yes. And
so right now, as it stands, the best thing that we have are things like relativity theory, quantum mechanics, evolution. These things are reasonably certain, right?
Mm-hmm. And you want to build your belief on things that are reasonably certain.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
And it just so happens that when we talk about eternal life, it just so happens that there's kind of a way to kind of find a little comfort just based on the science. I think Einstein even was quoted as saying that time is a persistent illusion. I think he was at a funeral, and somebody was grieving the death of a colleague of his. And he says, I understand the sadness, but for us physicists, we understand that time is just a persistent illusion.
Ooh.
So he kind of felt the same way,
That's pretty BA
theory.
If he really said that. That'd be cool. Especially in 1926 or...
Yeah, way back. Yeah,
where he was like, and nobody knew anything about most people didn't know anything about relativity and stuff. That'd be cool.
Exactly.
I appreciate your sincerity in having a belief that is based on things you can be reasonably certain about.
Right.
And so with that, I don't think there's much Reid and I can challenge you on unless we were more informed on the specific topics that your beliefs are based on and the research that goes into it. And I'd say keep looking for ideas that you can be reasonably certain about and see what you can take away from there. Reid, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
I mean, even for whatever I believe, I want to have markers that would change my mind. Even like gravity, like if I drop this if it goes up, that would change my mind about gravity in some way if I did that a lot. So does he have any markers in his mind that would change his mind about this? That
Great
if he found out
question.
were true?
Good question.
Yeah, if a lot of this block theory of time hinges on the idea that time and space are connected, and that they can be equated to a coordinate, and based on that is how we get the Mars rover to Mars. It's how we get we adjust for the time in our GPS devices from the satellites to our phones. If none of that stuff worked, if it turns out that this stuff doesn't really work, that it is actually accounted for some other reason other than relativity that we just didn't know, then that would be a marker to change my mind.
Yeah, you mentioned it was like B theory. Is there an A theory?
Yeah, it's called B. Yeah, it's called block theory, or B theory for short.
Oh,
and
so it's not.
I think
It's not
there's
like
a lot of
a
videos.
theory.
Yeah, check it out on YouTube. I think Brian Greene, Sean Carroll, Max Tegmark, Michio Kaku, they all have videos regarding it and talk about it.
This is something I read about. I read Lawrence Krauss's A Universe from Nothing.
Yeah, he's another one.
And I think that's the first time when I really heard about this topic. That was a year or two ago. And it was, from what I could understand of it, it was very fascinating.
Yeah. Blew my mind, man.
I'm sure this theory should be able to make predictions. I don't know if we have the capacity to test these predictions, but whatever those predictions are, they should be able to
time travel.
Fail.
That's the prediction.
Time travel.
Time travel. If you can travel to the past or the future, then you'd pretty much know it was absolutely true.
All right. Well, let's invent time travel then. I think that's where.
Yep,
I think that's the logical conclusion to this conversation right here, is that we got to do it, boys. We're the only ones that can. So, I'm looking forward to it. We'll do it. Anyway, Dylan, this was another interesting conversation. Thanks again for calling in. I really appreciate the support, and I look forward to hearing from you again.
Sure will. Talk to you guys later.
See you later.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. Time. You know what I'm saying? It's like a block. It's a big old block. You just got to look at it from the right perspective.
I mean, there's a lot of crazy ideas that a lot of smart people believe or hold to be possible and maybe like very plausible, like physicists and theoretical physicists. So I have no idea what could possibly be true in that regard. I
definitely can't rule it out. Right? Like it's not within my expertise to do that. But interestingly enough, we may be able to talk about this topic a little bit more. This next caller is Dean Meadows, calling in again from North Carolina. Dean, how's it going, bud?
Hi, guys. It's going well. Actually, some of the things that the previous caller was saying isn't entirely off base. Einstein did predict, or B theory does predict, that time travel is possible. One of the things that B theory is often touted for is to escape what's called dynamic time, where there is a fixed beginning of the universe, and at least from a philosophical perspective or from a apologetics perspective, it's often used to get away from the Kalam argument. So
here it comes. Wait, I need to introduce you a little bit more, Dean. This is Dean Meadows.
I'm not talking Kalam.
Okay. But you are talking fine universe, right? That's what fine tuning of the universe. That's what I got here.
Sure.
On the little. I'll introduce you just a little bit. This is Pastor Dean Meadows. He's called in a few times. I have a relationship with him, and this man has donated to the Patreon of Truth Wanted, which I think that means, I think it's the only ACA show that has a pastor that has donated to their Patrons. I could be wrong about that, but certainly the only one I know of. So I'm taking that to the bank, man. I like that.
There you go. That's good. It's simply to build goodwill, and you got a good show.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Okay. Continue what you wanted to talk to us about.
So, and I really like that discussion about B theory. Actually, what I'm working on right now at Biola is I'm trying to develop a cosmological argument for B theory. So hopefully I'm successful with that. But anyways, I digress.
You're coming up with a cosmological argument for B theory of time?
Yeah. I'm working on that.
Really? Okay. Cool.
I've got actually for my philosophy of religion class right now, I'm using a 10-page paper as a template for it. And if you want to see it when I'm done with it, I'll be more than happy to send it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be cool. I've never heard. I mean, I'm curious. At Biola, do they have like other researchers? Do they get to look at your argument and stuff? Do they have like philosophers and?
No. When you do the thesis, like anywhere else, you have someone oversees it, and you have two readers for it. So Scott Smith is he's overseeing the work. Greg Gansel, who used to work at Yale, and Dr. Gouda, who's from Durham University there.
But what is your degree in at Biola right now?
Master's in apologetics.
Okay. So this is for a master's course then?
Yeah.
Kind of like, okay.
Yeah. So let me, I guess I just want to get y'all's opinion on the fine-tuning argument, the fine-tuning of the universe, because Hitchens, the late Christopher Hitchens, who, in a weird way, I kind of admire, in his conversations with Douglas Wilson, said that the fine-tuning argument is probably the best argument for the existence of a God, not necessarily the Christian God. And I want to get y'all's opinion on what do you think are the biggest strengths of it, and what do you think is the biggest weakness of it?
Reid, you go first.
Well, I guess the strengths of it are like we have no way of testing like the odds of how likely life is in our universe if it wasn't fine-tuned in exactly the way it was fine-tuned. We don't have another universe to compare it to, but that might be the best argument I could say is the odds, how possibly unlikely it is life would never appear in that way. And I guess the weakness is Douglas Adams has the story about the cosmic puddle. You know, the puddle says to itself, wow, this hole, it's so finely tuned. It's like I was there perfectly for the hole, but he's just a puddle in the hole. And that's just how it turned out to be. That type of thing.
Yeah, I would say the strengths are it's an argument that works intuitively. And that's not to say that it's necessarily logical or even that it's a good argument, but intuitively, as human beings, when we look at nature and we observe the giraffe being able to reach the tall trees in the savannah with its tall neck, we think, there is a relationship there. It seems that that relationship is so specific that almost a designer is the one who puts that there. And so it's very easy to see why someone could come to that conclusion based on the observations they make. I think the weakness is, again, the mechanism, and we kind of talked about this earlier in the show, isn't explicitly defined even in the observation. And an intelligent design argument, as you were saying before, doesn't actually prove the Christian God exists, and doesn't necessarily prove that any kind of God exists, or or even a single creator. Could be multiple creators, or the mechanism of how that creation could even be done in the first place. Because really, we're just talking about an observation and an extrapolation based on that observation, saying that, something did this, but we have never, at least I have never observed something create something out of thin air with the specific things that we see in nature. So at the current time, I have no reason to believe any of those kinds of explanations are the reasons that we should believe it, right?
Well, let me let me, I guess, narrow my question, because I think there is a difference between the fine tuning of the universe and the intelligent design argument. I'm not necessarily arguing or asking about the intelligent design argument. I see the issues there. I guess what I'm referencing are kind of like more what Reid talked about with the cosmological, I guess the only way I could really say it is constants and quantities, like the force of gravity, right? The gravitational constant, the cosmological constant, things like that. Not necessarily, there's the flagellar motor and, that argument. I think those are two different arguments. So I guess
I see what you're saying.
More along. Okay.
Yeah. So that in response to that, I would say the same natural forces that we might see a relationship to, in the same way that I gave the example earlier of a giraffe and the tree, like intuitively there seems to be some sort of connection between these forces, I guess, and since we're talking about these specifically, that we might be able to observe. This gravity is keeping us on Earth. Therefore, it must have been designed there to do that for us, to serve us in a specific purpose, right? I mean, that could be an example of an extrapolation you can make from that observation. But I think I find the problem to be similar in that the extrapolation isn't really valid in my eyes, because, again, I have no reason to believe that anybody did anything to that natural force. For all we know, it could have been there for as long as we've known the observable universe to be. Again, it's a problem of mechanisms for me. It's a problem of the specificity of how these things came to be. There's simply no details on that from the observations that we can make besides what we understand from cosmology and the origins of the universe from that perspective.
Okay. Reid, you got anything else? Or ask another question?
Yeah, these settings that the universe has, these settings are a type of map we're using to try to map reality. And we always try to test reality to make sure our maps are accurate. And I would need another universe to test to see if another set of settings could do anything different. But I have no way of testing another universe.
Okay. So you're saying that because we don't have another universe to compare it to, then the conclusion is, I guess what I'm asking, then the conclusion is what? We just don't know, or?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So I guess my other question is, because it seems to be two competing ideas behind this, or maybe it could be more, which is the classic, or not classic, it's relatively new, the fine-tuning argument, which says, the fine-tuning of the universe is either, chance, necessity, or design, and then you seek to eliminate chance and necessity, and therefore it's designed. And then the other argument that is kind of used on the maybe skeptical side of the house is the multiverse hypothesis. And I guess my question is, with regards to the multiverse hypothesis, I mean, number one, do you guys think that that's a viable explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe that we see? Do you think that's a viable explanation?
No idea.
Yeah, I'd have to withhold judgment as well. Again, I've read a little bit about this, but I have no idea where I would place my confidence on it, because I don't understand all of the mechanisms behind it and how scientists are able to come to that conclusion. So I'd also say null.
Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. Well, cool, Dean. Thanks for calling.
Did Reid say anything?
Yeah, he said he's same thing.
Oh,
No
okay.
idea.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I guess my question would be, what's the empirical data for the multiverse?
You'd have to ask a physicist.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Cool deal. Just wanted y'all's opinion on it. And Dan, can I do a shameless plug real quick?
I guess if you make it quick, Dean. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll make it quick. At some point, January, February, Dan and I are gonna do a conversation on Shannon Q's channel, and I definitely just want to say, Dan, I look forward to that because of the people that I do talk to on the skeptical side of the house, and I'll include Reid in this as well. You're one of the nicer and more cordial gentlemen that I get to talk to, so I look forward to that.
Well, thank you, Dean. I appreciate that. You could almost say Reid has a sort of cordial curiosity to him.
Nice.
In some regards. But yeah, I look forward to the conversation, and we'll catch you next time, bud.
All right, later, guys.
See you, Dean.
Bye.
That's cool.
Yep.
Shannon's great, so that'd be fun to listen to.
Yes. So Dean and I were talking on Twitter about LGBT things, sort of like rights, sort of the understanding in Christianity, what all that means. And I don't know specifically what we are going to talk about within that realm, but just that general topic was what we were talking about before, and that's what he's interested in talking about again. So look forward. I'm going to get Shannon Q on this channel, by the way. That is a promise.
awesome.
I'm going to make this happen. I've gotten a lot of requests about, hey, let's get Shannon Q on. Look, I've been wanting to get her on from the start. It's actually a thing on her end. She has rugby games that she goes to on Friday nights, and that's why she hasn't been able to come on the show. But I think this season is going to be kind of over pretty soon, and so she'll be able to come on this next year. So, guys, definitely look forward to that. I have a few announcements for you guys that I want you guys to hear. But before I get into that, I want to say I've been reading a lot of your guys' email lately, and I absolutely love it. And what I would like to do in the future of this show is have a segment where not only having the call-ins, but also read emails from you guys that you send me, maybe asking questions or talking about the situations that you're going through. And I will respond to your email regardless of whether we talk about it on the show or not. So feel free to email me, but that's definitely something I want to do in the future. So if you guys want to email me about any specific topics, the email is down there in the corner. It's truth@atheist-community.org. Definitely check that out. And I'm always going to respond to it. And so, yeah, definitely do that for sure. Next big announcement I want to bring up. My good buddy, Genetically Modified Skeptic, has just hit 100,000 subscribers, which is super freaking cool. And to celebrate with that, I am going to be doing a stream with him right here at the ACA on December 16th. That is a Sunday. So look forward to that. I think we're going to do 6:30 Central Time right here. So if you like Truth Wanted and you like seeing my face and you want to see me in other places, definitely go on that stream. Go subscribe to his channel at Genetically Modified Skeptic to do that. Also, more announcements. We're not going to be doing a live show next week. And there's a good reason for that. And the reason is I'm graduating college. Woo! And this next weekend, I got to get ready to go do my graduation celebration and stuff. And so I'm actually going to be going from the city of my graduation all the way down here that same day, Sunday, so I can do the live stream with Drew. But unfortunately, I won't be able to make it here for Friday. So next week, we're going to put another one of our proto episodes up of Truth Wanted for you guys to listen to, so you're not missing out on any content or seeing my sweet, beautiful, handsome face. So look forward to that, guys. I am super excited. It's going to be really fun. Drew's a good buddy of mine, and it's just going to be awesome. It's going to be cool. Before we get going here, Reid, do you have any announcements or things you want to plug?
Not really. I went out last weekend, did some more interviews, so look forward to some more content on my channel. I've been moving the past month, so I didn't have time to upload anything, but look forward to some new videos here very soon.
Cool. Well, as always, you can donate to the Patreon. That's patreon.com/truthwanted if you want to help the people here at the ACA that help make this show really super freaking awesome. You can also find this show on iTunes, Spreaker, wherever else you get your podcasts at. Let's see. I already talked about next week. And you can also email me again at truth@atheist-community.org. That's a thing. Reid, where can people find you at?
You can just Google Cordial Curiosity. You'll find my YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's where you find me.
Cool. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this week's episode of Truth Wanted. Reid, it was super awesome having you on. I'd love to have you on again. This was fun, man.
Sure thing. Thanks so much, Dan, for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. Until next time, guys, always keep wanting the truth. Thanks again.